just since this is kind of a more open chat, and many of you might be thinking about becoming entrepreneurs or sort of just interested in the space and how I came to become a founder in AI. Certainly, if you had told me that years ago, I would have been shocked. I'll sort of just back up and share more about my career journey and what led me here. So I started my career actually in banking, but then quickly realized that that was not where I wanted to be spending my time, and moved from New York to the West Coast, and moved to Google as well. And that's where I spent the bulk of my career. I started in, like the behemoth, the money-making part of Google, which is ads, and certainly the more bureaucratic side of Google. But for me, it was so refreshing because it was so different from a bank. Like, it's probably the most bureaucratic part of Google, but it was like the most entrepreneurial thing I had ever seen. And so I started actually working on marketing strategy, which I knew nothing about, for tech B2B enterprise companies. So think Oracle, Symantec, Adobe, Salesforce, which was also interesting because I didn't even know those companies existed before I moved to this job. And then I had a chance to actually do really similar work, but with tech B2B startups. And that's where I sort of was like, oh, I got the startup bug. I loved the speed. I really felt like I became an extension of their team, and that was it for me. I felt like I really wanted to be part of launching businesses and growing businesses. And I actually had the opportunity to help launch a startup, I might put it in quotes, within Google. It was run as an independent company, and it was a platform to connect live experts to people across categories, experts to people over live video, almost like a marketplace built on top of Zoom, or at that time, Hangouts. Ironically, an idea that would have done incredibly well today, but we unfortunately, despite all of our efforts and like heart and soul poured into this product, we failed, and I was sort of brought on as one of the first business people, helped launch the product, and then unfortunately also had to go through shutting a product down. And at that point, I knew I wanted to do something similarly entrepreneurial, and I moved to the late stage venture arm within Alphabet, which is a parent company for Google, and what was so cool about being part of that is it was still really early days. The fund had been developed, it was funded, and there were some early success stories already. But what we were trying to figure out is how could Google, I think actually it was really what I saw, Google might not be the best at launching or starting new things, but it's fantastic at scaling and growing them. And so how could we leverage the playbooks of like how Google scaled and use that to accelerate the growth of the companies we invested in? And the best part for me was I got to work with the best minds at Google. I also got to work with some of the leading tech companies, so companies like Airbnb and Stripe, and Robinhood, and really learn from these incredible companies, incredible founding teams, and operators. And what I really saw there was this repeated, I think in part because we were tied to Google, we saw all of these tech challenges that our companies were facing. And I think what struck me was a few things. One was how basic some of the questions were. So the recurring themes were certainly around data science and machine learning, but the questions aren't what you would think. It wasn't like, how do I do this really sophisticated, technical approach? It was, how do I interview a data scientist? Hey, Google, you seem to be using machine learning in lots of areas of your business. Like, how does this apply to me? What are the ways I could be using machine learning to actually drive tangible business value? And so I really saw the demand, the sort of need for just help, support, navigating some of these questions that were really holding companies back from adopting machine learning and AI. The other thing I saw was these were companies that had every technical resource available to them. They were largely Silicon Valley based. They had huge and really high quality engineering teams. They had Google as an investor. Like, they had everything going for them. And this was still so hard. And so the question that sort of like plagued me was like, what is everyone else doing? Like, what's going on in the market? And after a bit of research, it sort of became pretty clear the answer was like a lot of talking about it, but really like not much. And I just felt like there was so much opportunity to I saw how much impact could be had by these technologies and help other companies bridge the gap to start realizing some of that value. And at the same time, once I left Google, I also saw there were lots of really talented engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists, researchers, who also, like me, no longer wanted to, Google was no longer, or another large company or whatever it was no longer the right place for them. There were other things they wanted to achieve. And I felt like there was this opportunity to be connecting those two groups. And so what we did was actually start Tribe with the intent of really helping solve the problems I saw on the customer side, but do it by actually leveraging sort of a distributed network or community that we created of really curated top engineers who would consult with those companies on discrete projects. And I think what really excites me and motivates me isn't just the potential for impact on the business side, but also the potential to be really empowering these incredible technologists, people like you all in your community, to really do what you want to achieve in your life, to sort of, reach for whatever it is you're so excited about, but help you monetize your skills, find interesting work. And the way we kind of think about it is bringing together the things you lose when you leave a big company, right? The compensation and the technical community and camaraderie, but sort of marry those two things with the autonomy of being a founder. And so, really empowering technologists to do what they do best and get paid a lot for it on their terms.
Well, and, the thing that struck me about, you starting Tribe AI was just that, like, first of all, why the AI space, right? Because, it seems like, and maybe it's just a factor of, you seeing like kind of the challenges that other companies were having in hiring. And we've talked so much about, what it means to interview for these jobs or vet candidates for these jobs. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, like why the focus in AI, and then, how are these organizations now using AI to drive impact, and what about that was like super exciting for you?
Yeah, so this is something I thought about a lot, and I think it goes back to what I said at the beginning, right? I didn't sort of set out to start an AI company, but I just felt like this problem was like, staring me in the face. And I think part of it wasn't just that I saw the pain, it was also that I saw the value. So, there probably isn't a part of Google that isn't run or powered by data science or machine learning. Like, I can't come up with like a product area basically. And I think the same could be said for Facebook or a bunch of other companies, right? But it's a handful. And so I feel like what really excited me around the AI space was just how nascent it felt. And so, I think it's such a fascinating dichotomy to me, right? Like, my mom knows what AI is. There was like a IBM Watson Super Bowl commercial, right? Like, these are words that are like in our common lexicon, and they're like super colloquial, right? Like, you could talk to your grandmother or grandparents about this. And yet, like, there's not that much happening still, right? AI adoption is still like so early. And so I think what really excites me is just like the potential for the market. And I think therefore the potential for Tribe to really create a huge business in this space, because there's so much need. And I think that by working on some of these really interesting problems in the space, we're also getting this incredible bird's eye view into where are some of these most interesting opportunities in AI and machine learning, or applications that can drive the most value. And I think there are also incredible opportunities for us to be leveraging this community of engineers we built, who in many cases have, I call it like entrepreneurial curiosity, right? They, might one day want to start a company. Well, we're providing them these opportunities to see different types of companies, to see different data environments, to see different problems around which I think you could build very real software solutions as well. And so I think that's sort of the AI space is fascinating. I'm curious to hear from all of you what excites you. But I think for me, it's so early and there's so much potential. And I'm so excited, honestly, that there are women focused on these problems as well, because I think given the market maturity, given how early we are, it's so critical there are diverse voices helping to shape this narrative and shape the technology that I believe really will be powering the next wave of great tech companies.
Yeah, and a lot of the books nowadays, they talk a lot about the lack of diversity and the kind of the ubiquitous nature of these technologies being available and being really created by one select group. So that's a focus for Tribe AI, right? To have more diverse candidates that are available to these organizations that are looking for talent.
Yeah, look, it's been a value from day one. I think we can always do better. Doing better than the industry standards is like not good enough. The standards are pretty low as far as I'm concerned. And so it's certainly something we're really thoughtful and intentional about. And I think that's I think about diversity as like a spectrum, right? There's so many, we just need different voices, right? People of different experience levels, people who come from different backgrounds. All of these things are so important, and they're even more important when they're inputs into building technical solutions that will power these companies and make decisions that will impact real people, right? That's why AI is exciting. It's because it will have impact, and so we have to have a say in that future. And so yes, I think we're really thoughtful about it on both our team and then also the community we're building as well. And I think the other piece you touched on was what's the business impact, right? I've sort of talked about this at a high level, but I think it's really this is the fun part for us because we get to see all of these projects. And, I think one of the biggest concerns we hear from business executives is that maybe some of them have been burned before, right? They've worked on an AI project and they didn't sort of see the results. Others might just be skittish to be making big investments. And I think what's really cool about the way we work is we really try to scope problems so that we can figure out how to add a ton of real value. So tie to business metrics, really move the needle. And so the impact we've seen is really variable. For startups, it's innovating and building novel technical solutions that have never been done before. So those could be things like predicting wildfire ignition or wildfire spread so that we can provide a better safety net for people who might be impacted by wildfires. There's another company we're working with that's using data to actually provide better healthcare for underserved populations, or even a startup that's trying to revolutionize the construction industry, leveraging computer vision, right? Those are kind of taking really novel approaches to solve problems that have never been done before. And then there's a whole other set of problems, which are kind of tried and true methods. Things like, optimizing pricing or optimizing process. But where we're scoping things, or I guess another example is, optimizing sort of an advertising model, right? For publishers, these are examples of things that have been done, right? You can probably name every tech company has sort of done this in some way. Maybe our approach might vary from other companies, but ultimately that's not what's exciting. What's really exciting is we're hugely impacting the sort of future roadmaps and future growth of these companies, because we're actually, proving that AI isn't just this like magical thing. It's like actually something that can be a huge part of your business. It can drive real business results, right? And it can actually start, once you can prove that case that there is that kind of value, you can start expanding and ultimately helping these companies apply AI to lots of different parts of their business and lots of problems.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're in this like really unique place, right? Because you're kind of looking at the industry from like almost this bird's eye view of how these roles are changing, how businesses are leveraging AI teams. I know we talked about the future of this industry, when we spoke before this, and it seems like, and we do have a lot of people that work in the field, so I'd love to get your perspective on, what does the future look like as far as how companies are going to invest in their teams. Maybe they won't have machine learning on premise. Maybe there is more opportunity for, freelance work or whatever. Like, how do you see that, in the next 10 years or something?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to like we're just so at early innings, and so I think like in the same way that like the last decade has been spent on the migration to the cloud, we're sort of in this migration to AI, and what we're seeing with companies that have moved their data to the cloud is everyone used to be on-prem. Now most companies are either cloud or hybrid. And I believe that that's sort of what you're going to start seeing with AI and machine learning. I think the companies that don't really invest in these areas of their business are going to be, outbid, outcompeted with, outrun. And I think that in order to compete, the way companies need to do it in sort of a way that actually really moves the needle for them will likely change. And so, the options today feel very binary. You either don't do machine learning or you hire a huge team and spend millions of dollars. And those feel like ridiculous options to me, right? And so what we really see is a future where you're not just hiring, and I'm curious again to hear from people who work in the industry, but what we hear a lot is actually, not all companies, even though all companies might need to leverage AI, not all companies need to build their own AI team. And I think that, the way we really see that is the market moving towards specialist skill sets. So in order to really have that differentiated impact, in order to move the needle on business metrics, you're going to need the best person in computer vision sometimes. Other times you're going to need data engineers. Other times you're going to need someone with NLP, right? And the ability to kind of like modulate and bring in the right people at the right time to solve the right problems can have such a differentiated impact relative to just hiring a few generalists who like are probably not going to be happy doing, some of the data engineering work, for example, right? Everyone sort of has areas where they spike and things that they're more drawn to. And where I really see the market going, particularly in this industry, where there's so much specialization in skill sets, is companies waking up to the differentiated value that specialists can have, and finding ways to actually think about their teams that are much more hybrid. So much less binary, but actually thinking about building teams in more creative ways. And, for us, I think we sort of think about redefining what it means to be sort of like an extension of their team, right? And so we don't work full time for any of our customers, and yet we do operate that way, right? And have as much value and as much impact as if we were a full-time employee.
Yeah, and I like to kind of finish off with this question because it is so relevant. And I know it goes so fast, Jaclyn. I feel like we just started talking. But so like, what would be your advice, I guess, to fellow entrepreneurs, just advice about, what to keep in mind, when you're starting your own company, things that you learned?
Yeah, I would start with, I mean, I used to see on the investing side all the time, companies, we would look at a startup in the space and say, oh, but like Google will compete with that, or like Microsoft will build that. You all, anyone who's starting a company, you have tremendous advantages over these companies. They are struggling. It is so hard to adopt machine learning. Like we are helping them and we're doing incredible things with them, but there's so much opportunity in the market. And I think what's really cool if you're getting started is just thinking about how you can be building AI into your business from day one, and not because it looks good in a pitch deck, which it might, but because it actually has like real value. And I think don't underestimate the advantages you have. I tried to start a company within a big company. Big companies move really differently, really slowly. There are lots of challenges. Your hands are tied in many, many ways. And so even though you sort of feel like the underdog, you actually have so many advantages in terms of innovation over big companies. And so I find that incredibly empowering. And then I think the other is just starting a company is really hard, right? Like let's all level with each other for a minute. And so, most of being a founder is working on things that like aren't quite working yet. And, just sticking with it until you find something that does. And when it does, like it's a different game. And I'm so inspired by anyone who decides to become an entrepreneur and really go down this path, because it isn't the easiest path, but it is incredibly fulfilling.
Awesome. Jaclyn, thank you so much. Sit tight. Everyone, your questions for Jaclyn, please write them in the chat so that we have some good questions for her at the end of this session. Thank you again, Jaclyn. I just love your perspective so much, and you bring this wealth of knowledge to anybody that's looking to maybe hire AI folks, or even people that are working, that are trying to figure out like, okay, what are my options, right? Where can I work? What should I be looking towards for the future? So I really, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much.
No, thank you all for having us, having me, having Tribe. As far as sort of keeping in touch, which I hope we can do, feel free to check out our website, tribe.ai. If you're interested in the community, you can apply there. If you're just interested in learning about insights from the community and sort of insights coming out of our work with customers, you can sign up for our newsletter. And really just excited to continue the relationship. Thank you, Irene, and the whole crew.
Awesome. And feel free to write all your links in the chat, Jaclyn, your LinkedIn, Tribe AIs. I know you guys are obviously looking for candidates. So if you are looking
and more hiring on the team. That's right. Yes. Sales, community, partnerships. So come find me.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Andra, hello. How are you?
Hey. Good to be here.
I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your company and give us a little background.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I really enjoyed Jaclyn's conversation and insights. I was kind of nodding throughout the conversation, and I feel like there's so much synergy, and we kind of see the world in the same way. So yeah, thank you for the insights. So about me, I'm Romanian originally, been living in New York for a decade now. Did a master's in statistics, which wasn't necessarily my favorite, but that really helped me build my career and product and growth. Initially, I worked on the agency side where I manage large accounts, L'Oreal, Estee Lauder. We worked with Google launching the first shoppable video and on innovation. And this was a few years ago. That was super exciting. But I really got into the pace of startups and the innovation, and wanted to work there. So I moved into high growth startups, SaaS, B2B, different industries, analytics, hospitality. And eventually I kind of moved into women-led companies, or focused on products driven by the female market. And in 2020, I actually opened my consultancy, focused on empathy and applied empathy and data, and then it's called Empathy Global. That's where I help women and underrepresented founders scale their startup with applied empathy and data. I've seen this as a challenge throughout my experience working with them in different startups. So they mostly struggle with understanding their customer, and how to penetrate a market based on that. So I really sit down with them and kind of help them empathize with their customer. So I'm kind of, their technology and growth partner. I sit at that intersection of tech, practical empathy, and the customer. And I think that really helped me, kind of flesh out Hiboo and the vision and the whole path behind it. And the idea of Hiboo started somewhere in 2018, just as a through my personal journey and professional journey in tech in New York and different startups. I just saw the lack of empathy in the workplace and the lack of empathy in technology, and I always wonder, can we bridge this abstract concept of empathy with technology? So Hiboo for me is a personal motivator. I want, my personal mission is to, I want every woman and underrepresented group to never feel disenfranchised, deprived of their rights, and have access to a clear career path at work. So initially we started with this idea of, a chatbot that would change your mood through content. And that was kind of in 2018 when conversation was mainly rule-based. But imagine that you are going through a big challenge, like you lost your job, for example. So we would kind of analyze the pain points, the context of the user, and send back reply with an article or a piece of content that would kind of show silver lining, someone that has gone through the same experience but they surpassed the challenges. So that was really fun. And eventually, we moved into a real business case, and we moved into in 2020 in diversity and inclusion, and how can we solve especially equity and inclusivity challenges in the workplace with conversational AI. So yeah, I guess our North Star, or my North Star, is to equalize women's opportunities in the workplace while proving that AI can benefit the greater good. And that's why I'm part of Women in AI, and focusing on the social criteria, part of the ESG criteria.
Yeah, well, and what was the moment where you were like, you know what, let's do a conversational AI, like let's go that route? Like what made you kind of focus on that particular type of technology, and what do you think are the advantages there?
So I've worked with chatbots since 2016 and my previous jobs, and I was really fascinated about what chatbots can do or have the potential of doing in the future. So and I've seen that at the same time companies were struggling with terrible experiences and chatbots, and I just started thinking, if we do it well, if we create a really great experience with the user in mind, human-centered, there's something to it. We can solve problems. And we've seen in our proprietary research and in third-party research that sometimes, patients or people in general, they're more prompt to share sensitive information with a bot than with their or face-to-face with a human. So that was really the beginning. Back in 2016 I was involved in the space, but in 2018 we realized that there was a gap in the market in terms of mental health, conversation AI, and then, a large diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So, my personal background and my experience kind of brought me here where I see there's huge potential to solve a human problem, which is kind of inclusion and diversity with conversational AI, never replacing the human interaction, but we can connect the dots. So we're on to that.
Yeah. Well, and this is the kind of nice thing about having you on at the same time as having Jaclyn on, because here you are, a founder trying to create a technical product, and you're, so what are some of the challenges you've had with, trying to get talent, trying to understand like the complexity of this technology that, you yourself might not be, actually putting together. And of course, like Jaclyn said, there are people that specialize, in just conversational AI. So can you talk a little bit about what's been coming up for you as far as roadblocks or challenges in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The challenges are constant, and I think the small challenges are kind of dependent on the direction and vision of the company. So, there's always something to learn. As a CEO or as a founder, you have to manage every dimension of the business, not only the product itself, so not only conversational AI in our case. So I think first and foremost, and if there's more women founders or founders on the call, I think what I've done personally is, you have to assess your strengths and weaknesses, accept them, and move on and hire more talented, more specialized people from Tribe AI, right? It's kind of like, if you guys read the book of the founder FAQ, the author speaks about the T-shape. So it's kind of like you're doing everything as a CEO and as a founder, but at some point you have to specialize. So be honest with yourself, be honest with who you are and your strengths, and double down on that. And then hire better people, more competent people on to operate the different departments. And in terms of specific roadblocks, technical roadblocks, first and foremost, it's in terms of conversational AI, there's it's a toddler still, right? So it's kind of like, where do you start from? And you're trying to piece together resources, advices from your mentors and your accelerator and your peers, and you kind of get lost. But I think once you go through all that, then you question yourself, and then you sit down, write your vision, then you're you go at it, right? And then you think about, okay, how can I build this chatbot interface, for example, with very limited with limited resources, without building something custom, because tomorrow I'll have to iterate. My investor might say, or my potential investor might say, this doesn't work, I'm not going to invest, show me a different use case, right? So how can you build quickly, iterate fast, and I guess fail? So I think no code chatbot interfaces, that was something that we were challenged by, and we're using voice flow and Bot Society, and you and me, Irene, we've been talking about it. But the limitations of that are that it doesn't allow for the whole experience for the user. And doesn't track specific KPIs. So when you look at the business side, you want to show different metrics of success. So how are you able to do that with with these interfaces? So that's one challenge. And then how do you find technical talent at an early stage with limited resources? And that's obviously something that Jaclyn talked about. I was fortunate enough to kind of have a network in New York, San Francisco, brought in a few people. We're still looking and improving. And I love that insight of specialized talent that comes in at the right time. We don't need to hire people full time as we used to. So I love that idea. Um, and then I think in our case at Hiboo, because we're conversational AI, the challenge is the conversation design itself. Um, First and foremost, you need a large team of people to create a great experience, a delightful experience, how we call it. You know, it's multimodal design. There's a product manager, there's NLU, there's fulfillment, there's you know, compliance, there's data science. How can you build a team at such an early stage with very limited resources? So I guess that's also you know, a question up in the air. If people have done it successfully, come to me. Um, and ultimately finding a space to talk about these challenges without limitations. You know, and I kind of started last year a founder to founder empathy talk, where we would sit down and kind of speak about the realities of being a founder and these technical limitations. So I found a lot of you know, support in that, but I think we can do more.
And your bot, I mean, I don't want to call it a bot, because we call it conversational AI now, because it's more than that. You know, it's not just, okay, here are some programmed answers, here are some programmed responses. You know, this is actually learning over the course of its relationship with you. So, you know, you're creating something that if someone gets sexually harassed, they can talk to it about it. Or if they are on maternity leave and it's weird now, you know, like these are the things that you're trying to tackle, you know, for women to feel safe at work, right? So how do you conceptualize a human-centered AI, you know, because that's something that a lot of people talk about, and everyone's like, yes, we're making AI more human, but like, what does that mean for you and for Hiboo? And I'm so sorry, I kept saying Hiboo.
Yeah, no worries. It's actually an owl for French, so I guess I'll have to add that
Oh.
pronunciation. Yeah, we think about human-centered design quite a lot, and human-centered AI for in from the perspective of conversation design is building conversations with the user in mind, in the user service, with language that engages and solves a problem. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of companies, and there's still so many brands on the market that are creating conversations, and you can see it from the initial prompt, that the bot focuses on the bot's capabilities only. Instead, we want to focus on what the bot can perform for the human across the screen. So it's not only Hiboo, I can do, it's what I can serve you with and how can I solve your problem, right? So, and then also always explaining the limitations and creating that trust. Never imply that you're human when you're not. And I've seen that a lot across industries. Hi, I'm Andra and I'm your assistant. What can I help you with? No, you have to mention, because users actually, if they know what they're confronted with, they treat that as such and they don't get frustrated, because again, in the end, you want to lead with a minimum delightful product, right? So you want to delight the end users, and we look at conversation as something, you know, how can we include all users? Like, how can we build globally relevant experiences and assistance? I mentioned earlier, like multimodal design. You know, how do we talk to the user? How do we use tech to enable that conversation? Accessibility mode. Not only that our algorithm takes into consideration the whole spectrum of identity markers, beyond ethnicity, gender, you know, your traditional ones. We look at disability, we look at socioeconomic status. So we think about that in you know, in the to include it in the experience. So how can you make it accessible for different challenges? And so it's a matter of looking at it from very different angles, and being, again, empathizing, always empathizing with your user. Never assume that you know always go to their groups, go to their forums, speak to them. We do a lot of proprietary research interviews. I sit down in roundtables with many women and employees in general to kind of find out their struggles and pain points when it comes to the workplace, and on the flip side with decision makers at companies, what can we solve for them in terms of diversity and inclusion? What are their top 3 KPIs? How can we show that in an analytics dashboard to inform you, week over week, the mood of your employees, turnaround, productivity, etc.
Yeah, well, and I think I just appreciate your perspective on this so much, because I myself am in the conversational AI space and I know how hard it is. So what you're endeavoring to do is so intense and it's so hard. So I wish you all the luck in the world with doing that. And just to close, we have hackathon coming up. So do you have any advice for people as far as like, what does hacking mean to you? Like being an entrepreneur, it's like you're hacking through like all these different phases of making a company, going through your roadblocks. So yeah, like kind of like what advice do you have for the fellow hackers out there?
Yeah, this is an advice that I always get and I struggle with as well. So we're not perfect in any way, but I think having a concise, clear vision statement, actually sitting down and writing that in 2, 3 sentences and work backward from that. You can build your business model from that. You can build, the pilot concept, etc. But it's all about what what you see for your company in 10 years and maybe 20 years, where you want to get. And for us is to become the most empathetic, AI that solves employees' problems. And then secondly, always focus on the end goal. I think we get distracted, especially at early stage, with different advices, different interactions. Again, all sorts of information that we're exposed to, but always go back home and think about your end goal, what I'm trying to achieve with this, and who's the right person to go to, and what's my message for that person. So yeah, those would be my top 2. And I think if you have that, it's somewhat easier to then conceptualize all the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, it can feel overwhelming for people, and it feels overwhelming for me often. So it's really, really nice to hear from you and just kind of get a glimpse into how you deal with these challenges. So thank you so much for sharing, Andra. And thank you, Jaclyn, as well. I just think you both offered such a nice perspective on this today. And it's so relevant for so many of us. And even on the participants list, I see a lot of people that are actually from Accelerate. And I just love to see that, because, we're already kind of in it, we're in this dance, and we're surprised by the things that come up so often. So it's really valuable to hear, your perspectives, especially you, Andra.
Yeah.
You've been at this for so long, like I feel like you're like my inspiration.
Oh, I guess we all need help in some shape or form. So I'm excited to be part of this, and learning about your journeys and potentially partnering and working together. I think it's very important to acknowledge that talent is a problem, and resources, which kind of Jaclyn is solving that problem. And then how do we get to pre-seed investment, right? And I think talent is part of that, because it's all nice and good to have diverse voices at the table, but if we don't fund those voices, we'll stay in stealth mode forever. So that's another kind of question to think about for the future. And I wanted to bring a couple of resources just from a couple of partners that I work with or friends of Hiboo. So I'm going to share that quickly so people can grab some discount codes. I know.
Do you want to show it, Andra, or
yes.
should I stop sharing so you can show it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so I know that, you know, it's always super helpful to have access to, especially for conversation design, for example. You know, this is a really great institute based in Amsterdam, but with a global presence. And if somebody needs to get trained in conversation design, I'm trained in that. You can get, you know, you can access it with a discount code. In terms of, you know, B2B sellers, which is something that we are looking at. How do you move your product into, you know, companies? So Founder Meets Sales was founded by my friend Dak, and they have low cost experience B2B sellers. They majority come from Silicon Valley. They're also startup. So, you know, crafted attention. This is just my Empathy Global is my program. You guys can take a look at it, and obviously my website and my Twitter. I'd love to stay in touch with people.
Yeah, and actually, would you mind copying
I'll
that into
present
the,
it.
yeah, would you mind copying that into the chat as well so people can click those links?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right. So I'm just gonna go to the chat and see what questions people had. Where is it? Okay, here we go. All right, do we have a link for more information about the hackathon? Janaya, did you post, is that, okay, yep, there it is. The link for hackathon is there.
Yeah.
All right, nice. We have people from Germany. Awesome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, apply for hackathon because they're still taking applications. And again, if I mean, you know, obviously we've been talking about entrepreneurship here, but if you just want to like just see what you can do in a weekend, apply, because you know that's what this is all about. And even just in a greater sense, what I really love about Women in AI and just these kinds of talks that we have, especially the last few that we've been having, is I just really love taking things away from this like dichotomy of competitive environment and may the best, you know, company win and only the people that have the right connections like get to, you know, be entrepreneurs. Like, no, like we can have, you know, it doesn't have to be the zero sum game. Like just because Andra's doing something doesn't mean I can't, right? Just because Jaclyn's starting, you know, Tribe AI doesn't mean that, you know, someone else can't, you know, try to support women in the space in similar ways, right? Like there is this, and it really is like a value system thing. Like some people like really do believe that, like they believe in this like super hierarchical kind of, you know, view of like, if I do it, then I'm not helping anyone else. And, you know, that's just a personal preference thing, you know, like for every person like that, there are plenty of others that want to share what they're doing and want to share resources and believe that that both parties can succeed. So that's what this is really all about, you know. Whether you're in this space and you want to be an individual contributor and work for a company, or you want to start your own, you know, you can learn from this collective wisdom that we've all amassed from our own life experiences. And, you know, that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to inspire people and give people options, and show you what's out there. Because if you're stuck in your own lane for so long, you're not aware of what else you can possibly be doing. So yeah, I really value this so much. Okay, tips on getting a committed coder for the AI product, where to look for these coders, Tribe AI, or I don't know, other places.
I mean, I think actually, I mean, look, this is, everyone knows that starting a company, you know, focus is so important. And so I think like as much as I love to sell, I can also say like when we're probably not going to be the best fit for something, and like, you know, getting off the ground, you probably have way cheaper options than us. And like, especially if this is a community of people that are sort of, you know, somewhat technical. There are lots of, you know, platforms where you can find coders, right? Just sort of engineers for hire. And so like, I think Tribe probably, you don't need us for that. And so we, I think my co-founder came from Gigster. They were sort of solving some of that a similar problem around engineering. There's TopTal, there's Upwork, right? There are lots of platforms for sort of freelance engineers. And I think that, talent marketplaces can be, we're not a talent marketplace really. We're sort of in this like messy in between talent marketplace and let's say like a consultancy. But they can be amazing. And I think that just isn't the direction we went, and we sort of ended up being like super, super focused. But there are tremendous resources out there, and you can really find great people at a much lower cost when you're getting off the ground. I don't know, Andra, does that resonate with you?
Yes. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that senior talent from the get-go is such a great resource, because we struggle between executional and having that bird's eye view. And at some point, you see your limitation as a founder, and you need a partner. So I think that's a follow-up question for you. Is it that you found with the connections that you made at Tribe AI and the people that you placed within companies, have they ever become maybe co-founders or really, equity stakeholders?
Yes, and many times. So, I think this is where we're super messy in between, right? A traditional consultancy would have it baked into their contracts that you can't steal our talent. Instead, our contracts say, steal our talent. Like, this is great. And, it's like conditional upon mutual fit, right? And so actually the whole idea is that, I hate looking for a job. It sucks. And like, you do all of your due diligence and you do everything you can. You're so thorough and you're so thoughtful and you don't sleep at night. And all you do is think about this decision, and still you have no idea what you're getting into. And so from like the seeker perspective, from someone who's looking for an opportunity or might be open to one, you just want to go do something interesting that you care about, working with good people, right? There are different things everyone's optimizing for. And so if you get a chance to consult with that company, often you can actually see what it's like. And then it goes from this like totally blind process to, wow, like I'm super bought in on this. Like I'm really energized solving these problems. Like there's so much impact I can have here. I work great with the founders, right? And on the sort of company side, they're no longer thinking like, oh goodness, I'm going to pay this engineer so much money and I have no idea what I'm going to get for it. They know exactly what they're going to get for it. They've been working together for the last few months. And so actually, I think it can be like a really fantastic relationship and off-ramp from Tribe, and also like an additional value we can bring to the community and to our customers. So that's kind of one of those where it's like win-win-win, and where we're sort of really happy to be facilitating those and just helping people find their path. But it usually starts with like a consulting project.
Right. I think I would love to explore relationship or kind of a synergy with Tribe AI. Well, let's keep in touch.
There's lots of follow-up conversations here. Yeah, obviously, I think our community is incredible. There are a bunch of people actually from our community on this call. So I feel like so lucky I get to meet your community, but also bring our communities together. And they're so wildly talented. I also think what makes it really special is that we're sort of handpicking people from this network for the specific project or problem we're trying to solve. And so, we're both scoping and defining narrow problems so that we can have a ton of impact, and then bringing in the right people. And so it just is amazing, to your point on senior talent. I think I've just been wowed by how much you can do with like 2 or 3 people versus like, honestly, we've even beat out teams of like hundreds of people working on something for a year, and like what we've done in months. And so again, like I'm such a believer in the power of technology and the power of small groups of the right people kind of focused on the right problems.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I mean, for those of you that are still on with us, sign up for the newsletter, follow these ladies on Twitter, on LinkedIn, whatever. If we can leverage our networks and actually find the resources we need, like, I want to echo what Jaclyn said earlier, that it really does seem like, okay, how can I compete with Amazon? How can I compete with Google? They've got all this technology, all these research people that, at their fingertips, they can decide, okay, you know what, let's try this new fun thing. But are they, I mean, yeah, Facebook has a lab, but are they pushing this new stuff all the time out in the market? Like, I really feel that, if you've got a small group of really focused people that are really passionate about what they're doing and aren't, sitting in their cushy little golden caskets doing their work every day and just kind of going through the motions, like, the energy of a young entrepreneur that has something that they want to birth into this world is so much stronger than someone that might be complacent in this bigger organization full of this bureaucratic red tape. And so I think that, there's a lot here to be excited about. So thank you both so much. Any closing statements? Anything anybody wants to add?
I'm so inspired by you all. This is so cool. I love this group. And like, I think for all the reasons we've talked about throughout, I'm just thrilled to see, I mean, I don't know, I was sort of thinking about it as I was getting dressed. It was like, when's the last time someone's wearing like hot pink to like an AI panel? And so like, I just get excited about the potential to disrupt this space and this industry, as well as like all the problems you're all solving that are incredibly meaningful and impactful. So can't wait to continue learning more.
Fantastic. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening. Those of you that are staying for the Accelerate session we have at 7 o'clock, I don't know if I'm going to keep this open because it starts in an hour. But yeah, I will be restarting the session and then we'll go into our thing. Because Jaclyn, as I've said so many times today, we're doing Accelerate, and Wednesday nights are actually our night for our session.
Awesome. You guys have a great night ahead.
Yeah.
Very,
all right. Thank
cool.
you, everyone, so much. Wishing you all the best. All the good vibes.
Thank you.